Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine put together by the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Find out more about us at tertiumquids.org. Find out about our Tuesday morning group coalition meetings, one coming up this week, and you'll get to hear from our first guest, who was actually our second guest last week, making a return visit to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. He's Delegate Ben Cline. Good morning, Ben. How are you doing, sir?
Joe, I'm doing great, very excited, and looking forward to great things to come.
Well, and I hope folks sign up to be part of the Tuesday morning group coalition in Richmond. They get to see you in person, meet you in person if they haven't already. Ben is back on the program because in the course of last week, it was announced that Congressman Bob Goodlatte would not be seeking re-election in 2018, and we had him on the program, and he said part of it was to make sure that whoever does run for the 6th Congressional District has the time necessary to fundraise and to get volunteers together. And very quickly after that, Delegate Ben Cline announced that he was one of a couple of Republicans seeking that nomination. What was the thought process behind that decision, Ben?
Well, it is essentially that my girls, who are 5 years old right now, are growing up in an uncertain times, and the future is not secured for them the way it was for me when I was growing up back in the 70s here in the Shenandoah Valley. We've got a beautiful place and some of the most excellent people here. Mm-hmm. And what we need to do is to secure that future for the next generation. And when I heard that Congressman Goodlatte was going to retire, I want to commend him for his 25 years of service. It takes a lot out of you, away from your family, away from your community, to go up to the swamp, so to speak, and do the work of the people. But I couldn't sit back and watch my nation continue to drift the way it has drifted under President Obama, and now under a divided, dysfunctional Congress, and leave the next generation a dysfunctional nation. So I'm gonna jump in and hopefully go on up there and be able to help secure this great nation for the next generation.
We have had on many occasions over the 8 or 9 years this program has existed, Ben, many folks who have left the Virginia House of Delegates or the Virginia Senate to go up to Washington, Robert Hurt, Tom Garrett, Morgan Griffith as well. And it has struck me that there's a commonality in the themes of what I hear, and I've heard it from all of them, and I've heard it from Dave Brad as well, that nothing really prepares you for the dysfunction you mentioned. Just recently, Tom Garrett was on the program saying he's never worked so hard to seemingly get so little moving forward, and not from his own efforts, but that you work and then nobody ever seems to get anything to the floor to debate, and the way it functions just seems to be so different than the Virginia General Assembly. Have you steeled yourself to that kind of challenge?
Well, I have grown accustomed to the ways of the House of Delegates in my 10-plus years there. And, some of the things that we do in the House, we balance our budget. We finish in 6 or 8 weeks. We record almost all votes. We should be recording all votes. That's something I'm fighting for. Mm-hmm. But we hear all bills, or 99% of the bills that are introduced, the bad ideas, the good ideas. And, we have a healthy debate, and those qualities are missing from Congress. And so the more that I can bring some fresh ideas up there and say, hey, why don't we just hear some more bills? And why don't we just start telling, the constituents the facts up here about our nation's deficit and mm-hmm. how we can't afford to do things like Obamacare, because you know what? In Virginia, I tell my constituents we can't afford to expand Medicaid, and here's why. And when I respect my constituents and I explain to them the reasons why we can't expand Medicaid, even though it may sound good in a sound bite by some liberals, and my opponent used it to great degree last fall. My constituents get it, and that's why I get reelected, because I'm honest with them, they're honest with me, and we work together. And so if we can do that up in Congress a little bit more, maybe we'll actually get some stuff done.
What about congressional leadership? I remember a time in 2012, doesn't seem all that long ago, where Paul Ryan was added to a ticket in order to bring conservative Tea Party chops to a ticket that, Mitt Romney was considered a middle-of-the-road, bridge-building Republican, and Paul Ryan was supposed to be bringing the Gadsden flag with him to the ticket, and now Paul Ryan has become almost the symbol of Washington, swamp living, get along to go along leadership. And it's fascinating watching that. But what about House leadership? If Congressman Ben Cline gets there, what would you like to see regarding House leadership and the ability to get bills to the floor and done?
Well, I'd like to see us play a little offense for a change. One of the things I've noticed, it's very similar to what we do in Virginia, which is, unfortunately, placate our moderates all too often. We have a very strong group of conservatives in the Virginia House. I'm chair of the Conservative Caucus, and we push our leadership to move conservative legislation. Let's push tax cuts, because that will invigorate the economy, and let's excite our constituents back home about that. And all too often, whenever we want to move conservative legislation, we get the moderates in endangered seats complaining that it will hurt their chances for re-election. But all you do that way is play defense until you get to a point where you have an election like this one, where your moderates get all washed away. Now, if we had actually led on legislation and changed the debate around in those moderate districts to actually put the Democrats and the liberals on defense, maybe our moderates would have been able to get secure footing and push these issues forward and educate their constituents and get them on our side. That's what they need to do in Washington. They need to stop just being controlled by the moderate faction of the caucus. And when it comes to things like immigration, we need to build the wall. We need to enforce our immigration laws. And when it comes to health care, we need to repeal and replace Obamacare. And when it comes to tax reform, we need to cut taxes and help small businesses. And moderates can be listened to and brought into the discussion. We want to work with them, but ultimately we can't let them drive the agenda because the majority of the caucus, both in Richmond and in Washington, is common sense conservative.
Mm-hmm. Well, you bring up the losses on Election Day, and I know we had you on to do a post game there, and we've looked at it, and I've heard from more than one case, and you sort of alluded to it there as well, is that there seemed to have been a case where some of the losses in the Virginia House of Delegates were amongst members who weren't necessarily comfortable either with the president or with the rhetoric that may be used or the style points or conservative principles, and therefore they lost to a progressive that came aggressively out of the progressive box and said, we've got to pay for everybody's college and we've got to pay for everybody's health, and all the usual, ironically, indefensible points that they have, but they come out on offense and don't really give you a chance to put them on the defense to explain how all that would work. Do you think that that's something that we can defend in the House because of the losses on Tuesday? A lot of folks are saying that the Virginia congressional delegation could suffer enormous losses amongst conservatives. The 10th, the 5th, the 7th are all seeing big campaigns already, fundraised campaigns to fight and to flip those seats now. I'm sure the 6th will see the same thing out of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Lots of money will be flowing into these seats. Can you make the case against some of the progressives then, Ben, that when this is all said and done, these are still bad ideas, whether it's Bob Goodlatte, the representative of the 6th, or in this case, Ben Cline?
Well, that's exactly what we have to do. We have to take the offense. We can't let, we have to get out and match the passionate opposition of the liberals to our president's agenda. with passionate advocacy for his agenda. We have to get out there and push for tax reform and say, you know what, this president ran and won on great ideas like simplifying the tax code, helping middle America, helping to enforce our immigration laws. And you know what? Even if Congress is not successfully doing those things, all you're doing is demoralizing the base. All you're doing is making it less likely that they're going to turn out for House of Delegates race up in Northern Virginia, especially when your delegates are running away from that president's agenda. And instead, your opposition, it doesn't matter. They're going to be passionate. They're going to turn out in record numbers. Now, our guys turned out record numbers as well, but they were nowhere near the numbers that were needed to remain in office. So I don't want to learn the wrong lessons from this election going into 18. You know, everybody's scared about losing the House majority. Well, then don't do what, frankly, my speaker did over the past couple of years, which was run from conservative legislation, embrace things like tax increases in 2013, and we need to stand strong on conservative principles. That's how you win elections.
One of Bob Goodlatte's seminal moments with this program was right after Bob McDonnell allowed the House and Senate committee to rewrite his transportation tax funding plan and turn it into what I call the platypus, which is a beaver designed by government committee. And they made the centerpiece of it this mysterious internet sales tax. I called Bob Goodlatte because he had just become chair of the Judiciary Committee that would oversee that. And I asked him, I said, is this something that can happen? And his statement to me was, nobody in Virginia ever asked me about that, and I would have told them that that's not going to happen. Is that, and then he worked hard to make sure that taxes on the internet were fought against, and he's pushed that, controversially hurting the transportation bill that guys like Creed Eads worked towards cobbling together and creating this, quote, compromise plan that if it had been me, I probably would have vetoed it, but I'm not the governor. So those kind of things, very quietly, even standing up for what's right in the face of it might hurt somebody back in Virginia. Is that the kind of thing that you want Bob Goodlatte's legacy to be, but also the 6th District's future going forward? And they seem to reward it every year. Bob gets about 60% of the vote each year.
Bob Goodlatte was a strong anti-tax Republican, and that's because the district is very strong anti-tax. And I will lead the fight against tax increases just as I led the fight in 2013. I was the only Republican to stand up and speak against the Speaker's tax increase. You know, the Speaker stands right up there at the rostrum, and you have to look at him when you're arguing. And I argued passionately against his own bill for passage. And it's hard when your speaker and your governor of your own party are working for something that is fundamentally at odds with your party's positions on the issues. It's hard to stand up to them, but you've got to do it because ultimately you're responsible to the people. And that's what I'm going to do if I'm elected to Congress. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to fight for our principles. It doesn't matter whether I'm fighting Democrats or we're fighting Republicans who aren't standing up for those principles. I'm going to fight, and that's what they'd be electing if they came and supported me for Congress.
Delegate Ben Cline is on with us talking about his announcement that he's going to run for the 6th District. There's going to be a primary battle, definitely 2 so far, probably more Republicans seeking that nomination. I always hear from people that say it's a bad thing, but then, you look at the end result of some of the primary battles that have come out, even out of the 5th District, both when Robert Hurt won over 6 other candidates, 4 other candidates, Tom Garrett. Those primary challenges are what make us stronger representatives, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. Competition is a great thing. I have been opposed by 6 opponents over the course of my 9 elections, and that's healthy. so when my most recent opponent declared, I said, let's have a great debate about the issues, because he was on the opposite side of everything from me. And for primaries, it's the same thing. If the people who select the nominees need to hear that you stand for the right issues, that you can articulate them passionately, that you have the experience necessary and the knowledge necessary to get the job done when you get there. Those are all important things that I hope to educate the primary voters about over the next several months.
Is the danger, though, the win-at-all-costs scorched earth approach? And we see this sometimes in primaries where, if your candidate doesn't win, you stay home. There was great concern about that in the gubernatorial race. And as you mentioned, Ed Gillespie got more votes than the last three governors in any election, Terry McAuliffe, Tim Kaine, or Bob McDonnell. So it didn't seem like Virginia conservatives stayed home after the primary. But that always seems to be the concern, is that sometimes it's difficult to express our differences of opinion about something without leaving people with the, well, we'll take our jacks and go home mentality. Can you do that as a candidate, and do you think that will be the debate going on until the primary, I guess, in June for the 6th District?
The good thing is out here in the 6th District, we have a strong, broad-based conservative primary voters who are very informed and are looking not just at who they're nominating for the office, but also to November. Fortunately, we have a very conservative 6th District that hasn't voted for the Democrats in a long time. But Jim Olin, who was Bob Goodlatte's predecessor, was a Democrat. And so we have to be wary, especially in this environment, that they're going to fight for it. And so it's important who we nominate, to make sure that person can argue the issues effectively, can present the experience and the knowledge necessary to get up there and get to work and be able to deliver effectively for the district. So it's in the minds of primary voters. I have no doubt about that, and I have the confidence that they'll make the right decision in the spring.
Let's talk a little bit about money, because this was asked of me after the announcement that Bob would not seek re-election, that there's going to be a lot of out-of-state money, a lot of PAC money coming into this race, based on the fact that it did in the governor's race and some of these House of Delegates races. But I argued that was because Virginia and New Jersey were really isolated in an election cycle. In 2018, there's going to be a nation full of congressional and senatorial races, so it's not going to be as easy as a Michael Bloomberg or a Tom Steyer just to send bags and bags of money into a candidacy, correct?
Well, that's true. It seems sometimes like the liberal left has endless amounts of money to spend on these races. California, billionaires; New York, billionaires. But I can tell you that looking at the numbers, the 6th District in Virginia is not even in the top tier of the most competitive districts in Virginia, much less the nation. You've got the 10th District, you've got the 7th District, you've got the 1st District, you've got the 5th District, all of which were margins that were closer than Ed Gillespie's margin in the 6th Congressional District, and Trump had a big win in the 6th Congressional District, and my House District in the 24th was the 10th best Trump district in the state. So, I think that they'll look elsewhere in the fall. Now, that comes back to what your other question was. We have to look at who we nominate. I mean, if the candidate can raise the issues and debate the issues effectively, then that makes sure that the money doesn't come in to the district. So I'm confident that we'll be competitive.
You mentioned the 10th, and in the 10th, without names or anything else, we've talked to both the congressperson from the 10th and their campaign chair, district chair, and both are staunchly anti the president, and in a lot of cases, not necessarily on policy, but on procedure or process more than anything else, and that might turn out to be a detriment to them in the election because their opponent is going to cast them in with the president anyway, and their primary opponents might just beat them in the first place for it. So I think it's one of those things that you have to be true to yourself. And Ben, if I may, one of the things I've always known about you is Ben Cline has always been Ben Cline, and whether it's at an event with Martha Bonetta or anyone else that we've hosted together, you have always just been an easygoing fellow who's passionate without being off-putting about conservative principles. And I've always looked to you as somebody who said, listen, if we could all aspire to promote conservative values the way you do, I think we'd be able to take the offense a lot better. And I appreciate everything that you've done. What is the fundraising goal? When do you begin? Is there any time like the present? Is it too soon since the election to start asking donors to help raise money for the June primaries? And is there a website people can go to visit?
Sure. If the one interesting thing about this process that I'm learning is that the rules at the federal level are different than the rules at the state level. In Virginia, you don't have limits on contributions for the state elections, and it's a transparent yet uncapped environment. So now in the federal level, you need to have that transparency as well, but you have much more limited caps on the donation. So we're going to be going to the grassroots for contributions, and hopefully we'll be able to raise what we need to be competitive. We're busy putting together the website, everything to get that done. The website is benclineforcongress.com.
Great.
And that is up and running, so everybody can go there and check out my bio and the information about how to get a hold of me and how to eventually contribute to the campaign when all that's up and running. I think should be soon. But appreciate all the support we get from the grassroots. It's been fantastic. The enthusiasm that we've seen over the last, well, I guess it's only been 48 hours, but the last couple of days that
the whirlwind.
We've been campaigning. It's just been nonstop, and it's been exciting, and we hope to keep that excitement going into the spring.
Delegate Cline, I'm going to ask you to switch your hats for a second, and perhaps I'm hopeful with your announcement that you're going to do this, that you'll have a strong leadership position, at least on the stump level. I know Kirk Cox is the House Republican, House Majority Leader still, and that may or may not change come January. But I've been asked several times, what am I going to make out of this 51-49, and I guess there are still recounts happening, House of Delegates. And one of the things I think of is that it's going to be harder to keep party unity because there's, everybody seems to have a veto vote. Is this going to be an instance where keep an eye on Ben Cline to see what kind of leadership he can have on a legislative floor where there's a lot of different potential veto votes?
It's going to be an exciting session. Our governor's made his positions pretty clear on most issues, although the bill I introduced on sanctuary cities, banning sanctuary cities, that got vetoed by Terry McAuliffe. Our new governor, Ralph Northam, has said he'll sign it, and that's fantastic. So we'll do that again, but we need to have a united caucus with no room for error. We can't have a single delegate going against the team. It's going to mean some pretty heated conversations behind closed doors about what we're moving and what we're going to get behind. And I always advocate that the caucus, we shouldn't move a piece of legislation that a majority of the caucus is not behind. It's the rule that you should get a majority of the majority before you move legislation and not try and let the Democrats control the agenda. So I think we're going to have debates like that where when you get a majority of the majority, you really need every member of the caucus to play ball, and that's how you're going to get conservative solutions across the finish line.
Are there moderate Democrats that we might be surprised to see perhaps leave some of the more radical, lean that their minority is taken in the House of Delegates that might caucus with some votes, or at least vote in final passage of some conservative legislation?
I have the hope that some of these freshmen in swing districts may adopt a moderate approach to things, but I didn't hear that from the campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
All I heard was anti this and anti that. But the only two incumbents who even remotely expressed some kind of bipartisan spirit were Mike Mullen and John Bell. And I don't know if they're going to have the incentive to reach across the aisle again or not. And I know Mike Mullen from the Judiciary Committee, Courts of Justice, and so we'll work together on those issues again. And to the degree that there are bipartisan issues like privacy issues that I've worked with the Privacy Caucus on, Sam Rasool and others on, I'll continue to work on those issues because the Fourth Amendment is very important to me. But for the most part, I think it's going to be a very tough, gritty session, and it's going to take a lot of leadership from Kurt Cox and the rest of the team to get us out on time and on budget.
Well, I appreciate your announcement. We're going to continue to watch this campaign. Obviously, the General Assembly comes first, but you'll be fundraising again. It's BenClineForCongress.com there. Delegate Cline, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the time. If we don't talk to you before then, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Joe, thanks so much.
Delegate Ben Cline on with us, Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Up next, we're going to talk about that Senate version of tax reform with Adam Michel, the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation, coming up next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.